Good evening. We're back with more Disney Lorcana, and this evening will be a tier list for all of the rares, super rares, and legendary cards in the Into the Inklands set, the most recent set. The S tier will be must-buy cards. The A tier are going to be very strong cards that a lot of players will want to buy, unless you're on a very tight budget. B tier will be more niche cards, but it'll still be worth getting at some point. And anything lower than that is likely not going to be something you'll want to pick up unless you're a collector, but we will rank them nonetheless. We'll get started in alphabetical order with Alice T. Alchemist, a 6-cost 4/4. I've already reviewed all of the cards in other videos, so we're just going to talk about ranking them today. Alice exerts chosen opposing character and all other opposing characters with the same name. This seems like this card is built to counter a deck that is focused all around different versions of one character. That deck does not exist in the current meta, and so this card is absolutely terrible because it doesn't really offer anything stats-wise or lore-wise in exchange for its cost. When we're talking about any character that's cost 5 or up, we're going to have to talk about removal because removal is prominent in the meta right now. The most prominent meta removal cards would be Along Came Zeus, which deals 5 damage. Then there's Madame Medusa that just removes a card or a character that has 3 attack or less. You also have Maleficent that is featured pretty prominently in our red-blue deck right now. Hades is also in some blue decks. And then there's bounce cards in the emerald decks that are able to deal with big cost cards very efficiently. So if a big cost card does not offer you anything immediately, it's probably not going to be very good in a competitive meta. It'll be good against players who don't have those big removal cards, but in a competitive meta, big cards that don't offer you anything are not typically going to be very good, unless they're so overwhelmingly good that it doesn't matter they don't offer you anything immediately, because if they can't be removed, they just win you the game. Anyway, next up will be Along Came Zeus, and then Along Came Zeus to use its proper name. This is an S tier card. 4 cost, not inkable, deal 5 damage to chosen character or location, and it's a song. This card is featured in pretty much every steel deck right now, and it will be for some time. It's very, very strong, efficient removal. It can remove things that cost more than it does. It can be used on locations, and it can be sung. Really, really strong card. Pretty much every player is going to want this card if you're serious, unless you're not playing any steel decks and don't intend to, which is hard to imagine because pretty much every deck runs either steel or ruby right now. I guess there's an emerald amethyst deck that's pretty good though. Bounce. Next up is Ariel, 3 cost 2/3 with evasive. Whenever you play a song, chosen character of yours gains evasive until the start of your next turn. I don't put a very high priority on this ability at all, and her stats really aren't very good. I wouldn't say she's as bad as Alice, but we're going to put her in the D tier. I don't think anybody except for collectors is really going to want this card. Audrey Ramirez, a 5-cost 2/5 with ward. Whenever this character quests, ready one of your items. There's 1 or 2 prominent items decks in Sapphire, for Sapphire in the meta right now. Neither of them are very strong. I wouldn't say this character is terrible. I shouldn't say neither of them are very strong. I should say this character is not very strong in either of those decks. Both of those decks are very strong. I misspoke there. Both of those items, the blue steel deck and the blue ruby deck, are both very strong decks in the meta and contenders for best deck in the game. But this card is not very strong in either of those decks. Whenever this character quests, ready one of your items is not a bad ability if you actually need items ready more than once per turn. I've found in that deck that when playing that deck, sometimes you don't have a use for the items once per turn, let alone twice. Now, if you got something like Lucky Dime out, this could be very good. Very, very good with Lucky Dime. But that's a niche case. Players who play Lucky Dime typically don't run 4 copies because it's uninkable. And so Lucky Dime isn't going to be impactful every game and wouldn't justify running Audrey Ramirez. Nonetheless, because she does have a case where she's pretty good, I'm going to put her in the C tier. I think she's definitely not terrible. And with that ward, you could keep her around, combo her with Lucky Dime. Be pretty good. Yeah, I could see it. I don't think it's strong enough or consistent enough to get played, though. Aurelian Gyrosensor. 2 cost whenever one of your character's quests. You may look at the top card of your deck, put it on either the top or bottom of your deck. So it'll allow you to cycle through the deck and control what you draw. I don't think that's very good. It's interesting. Whenever one of your character's quests, you can look at the top card and then put it on the top or bottom. So it's not card draw, it's just scrying. It could combo with other scrying cards if they existed. They don't really exist. I'm going to put this card in the D tier right now, ahead of Ariel. I don't see this getting played at the moment, but the potential exists in the future for it to be good. Baloo, 3 cost, not inkable, 0/3 bodyguard. When this character is banished, gain 2 lore. So he's a guaranteed 2 lore for your 3 ink. And if you choose to not have him enter play exerted, he could be a guaranteed 3 lore. Unless he gets bounced back to your hand inevitably, or indefinitely. I have played against this card where I bounced him back repeatedly. Nonetheless, if you're guaranteeing 3 lore for a 3 cost card, that's not bad. He is uninkable. I'm going to put him in the B tier. I like this card a little bit. I've seen him in a Rush type deck, Amber Rush, which is one of 2 playable decks from the Amber Sphere. And I didn't hate it. It performed decently. I don't really see it featured in the best version of the Amber Rush decks. But I think anytime you can get the same number of lore as the cost of a card, especially cards over 2, you're doing good. And Baloo guarantees that. Now, as a bodyguard, his utility is limited by that 0 attack, but he will generate some lore for you and get in the way a little bit. The uninkable hurts him a lot. I think he might be into the A tier if he was inkable, but he isn't. Bell's House. 1 cost, 2 movement cost, 6 health. If you have a character here, you pay 1 less energy to play items. It's good in the items deck, but it's expensive. So if you're going to pay 3 to get a character there, then you have to play 4 items to take full advantage of this card because it's not offering you any lore. Are you going to be able to play that many items before the opponent deals 6 damage? No. So its utility is that it forces the opponent to deal 6 damage, but is that worth a card slot? No, not really. This is going in the C tier. It's going to end up pretty low down the C tier, I think. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's playable. But it's not like super low value. At least it makes your opponent deal 6 damage. If they don't want to, you can get some item discount. Cost reduction is good. So we'll stick it in C tier. Next up we have Bernard, 4 cost, 1/5. At the end of your turn, if this character is exerted, you may ready another chosen character of yours. So he protects a character, a fellow character, by readying them at the end of your turn. 1/5 for 4 cost is bad. He does have 2 lore. This is going to go in the D tier. I don't think this card is good. Don't think it will really ever see play. Not going to recommend anybody pick it up. Too low stats and the ability isn't useful enough. Captain Hook, 5 cost 5/4. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, ready this character. He can't quest for the rest of this turn. I think he's decent with, what is it, the Jolly Roger that gives pirates rush. I could see him getting played in that type of deck. Characters named Peter Pan lose evasive and can't gain evasive. That one lore really hurts him, though. He's going in the C tier for that reason, because he only has one lore. For a 5 cost, you really don't want to play any 5 cost characters that only have one lore. Now, if you can combo him with the Jolly Roger, he can give you something right away, but would he be better than playing a card like Scar or Maui, who offer something similar? No. You'd always play Maui. Would you play both? No. So, Cap, probably not, anyway. I haven't seen anybody do it. So, Captain Hook seems like a niche or a fun character for a pirate-themed deck. Chernabog, 10 cost, not inkable, 9/9. For each character card in discard, you pay 1 ink less to play this character. When you play this character, shuffle all character cards from your discard into your deck. The cost reduction means you can play this card very efficiently and get a lot of stats for your cost. It doesn't offer you anything immediately, so he is very vulnerable to removal. But because he can enter the board efficiently, and if the opponent can't remove him, he offers you a lot. He's going in the A tier. I think this card is very good. However, the deck that it's good in, the Creature Swarm deck, is really only a B plus tier deck. But compared to the other cards in the set, and we are comparing these cards to each other, I think Chernabog is very strong. I like it. Next up we have Cursed Merfolk. 1 cost, not inkable, 0/1. Whenever this character is challenged, each opponent chooses and discards a card. 2 lore. This is a very strong card. I would say this is a high A tier card. Chernabog's probably going to go low A tier. He could even end up in the B tier, to be honest. But Cursed Merfolk will pretty much always give you something. Opponent's not going to use bounce cards or big removal on it generally. And sometimes they will if they really don't want to discard a card. But it gives you 2 lore every turn until the opponent decides to deal with it, and then they have to discard a card. This is one of my favorite cards in the set. I think it's underrated, though I do see it played still, but I think it's underrated. I think it's a really, really good card, and it's going to go in pretty much every one of my Emerald decks, I think. I like that card. Next up we have Fang, River City. 4 cost, 2 movement cost, 6 health. Characters gain ward and evasive while here. Generates 2 lore. I think it's solid just because it generates 2 lore for 4 cost. Pretty much every location that does that is pretty solid. But the 6 health hurts it a lot, so it's not going to go any higher than B tier. I don't think any location that's 4 cost and 2 lores would go any lower than B tier. Those are all pretty good. That movement cost is high, though. It offers something, but that 6 health means that if you do pay the cost to move a character there, the opponent's just going to do the 6 damage. It's going to be hard to do anything about that. So they're, just an inconvenience to the opponent. If he does ignore it, it'll generate some lore. But we can't put it any higher than B tier. I do think it's decent, though. It's decent just because it generates 2 lore every round. Friend Like Me, 5 cost, song. Each player puts the top 3 cards of their deck into their inkwell face down and exerted. I've seen this card played, but not in any really good decks. I think it's pretty bad. You have to build your deck to take advantage of it. It's only good in certain situations. Wouldn't recommend anybody pick this up. I don't think it's good. I think it's pretty bad. The fact that it does this for both players, it's just not good. If it was just like a 5 cost action, not a song, and it put only your 3 cards into the inkwell, I think we would see play. But maybe that would be too strong. Genie, Supportive Friend. 4 cost, 3/5. Whenever this character quests, you may shuffle this card into your deck to draw 3 cards. Drawing 3 cards for 4 cost is okay. It's certainly not bad. But if that's all it does and it's not inkable, it's not really good enough. I think this card is bad. I think it's really bad. You get this card out, you shuffle it into your deck, so you generate 1 lore, and you draw 3 cards. However, it's not inkable. And so basically it's just a 4 cost non-inkable to draw 3 cards and generate 1 lore. Really doesn't see play. Is it going to be D or F tier? Because of the uninkable, I would handicap this pretty low. I think it's pretty bad. I'm going to put it in the F tier. Don't like the card at all. Drawing 3 cards seems good, but that cost is very high for that effect. Grandma Tala, 7 cost, 4/8, shift 5. Whenever a card is put into your inkwell, gain 1 lore. I think it's pretty good. 4/8 is decent stats, but the constant generation of lore every round, if the opponent doesn't deal with this, is good. And the shift means you can get something for it right away. If you shift it onto another Grammatala, you can attack right away, or you can generate at least 1 lore right away. It's good. It's going in the A tier, I think ahead of Sharon Bog. You don't really see it in any of the elite Sapphire decks right now. It's kind of on the periphery. It would be like the next card up if one of the big Sapphire cards didn't exist. But I think it's strong enough to get up into the A tier. And I do think there will be a very good Sapphire deck created which will play Grammatala. We're relatively early in the cycle of the set right now, and players are still figuring things out. I think we'll see some Grammatala as the set progresses, but it's not going to be a very high priority recommend. It'll be fairly low down the S or A card list. Gustav the Giant, 3 cost, 6/6. This character enters play exerted and can't ready at the start of your turn. During your turn, whenever one of your other characters banishes another character in a challenge, you may ready this character. Those restrictions on what you can do with this makes this pretty bad. It fights for the board if you're already fighting for the board effectively. And if you're not, it does nothing, so I see it as like a win more card. I'm going to put it in the F tier. I don't think we really ever see this card played, unless there's effects that come out that like silence one of your cards or something like that, but otherwise probably not. Gyro Gear Loose, 3 cost, 1/4, exert to put an item from your discard on top of your deck, so you can cycle items that you have discarded back through. I think that's too weak an effect to be very good. It's not terrible. It'll synergize with item decks, but I really don't see item decks playing this because the stats are too weak. And you don't have enough of a need to get back items that have been discarded. There's enough items available in the deck to just continue drawing. You'd always prefer kind of card draw to getting an item back on top of your deck, and this doesn't even draw that card. You still have to draw it later, so this is going in the D tier. Don't think it's very good. Hades, 6 cost, 5/5, ready your Titan characters. Have not seen any attempts at a Titan synergy deck. Could that deck exist? Perhaps, but I think it would be more of a fun deck, but it'll go in the C tier. It's not a bad effect if you were playing a Titan synergy deck. It would certainly center around Hades or other cards that offer Titan synergy, but that deck doesn't really exist except as a fun or thematic deck at the moment. Heart of Atlantis, 4 cost, not inkable. Exert, you pay 2 energy less for the next character you play this turn. So you can do that every turn. It's a good cost reduction card. It's really solid. Now the not inkable does hurt it. I would say you have to use it 3 times for it to be really good, which would require you to have some card draw in your deck because you would swiftly run out of cards if you're playing them that efficiently. One of the issues with the character swarm amber decks is card draw. They don't draw cards very efficiently. Nonetheless, we're going to put Heart of Atlantis in the high B tier. You can even make an argument for A tier. I think it's really good. It may be overkill, actually. It's hurt by being uninkable, of course. But I think it's really good. Very good item. Heart of Tefiti, 3 cost. Exert, pay 2 energy to put the top card of your deck into your inkwell. Face down and exerted. I've seen some attempts to play this. It's a very expensive card. And the expense means it takes a long time to get full value out of it. It is going to go in the B tier, but it'll be lower down the B tier. Just because it's so slow. I've seen attempts to play it, though, in some pretty decent decks, but it's a very slow card because of the high cost of its effect. Helga Sinclair, 5 cost, non-inkable, 4/4, shift 3. Whenever this character quests, you may deal 3 damage to chosen damaged character. This does have some synergy with a card like Tinkerbell or small removal cards. But it's not an easy effect to set up, and it's a non-inkable card. For me, this card goes in the C tier. It'll be high up the C tier. I think it's unwieldy, though. And I think the combos that it works with are... Well, I mean, you could play this on 5, play Tinkerbell on 6, then quest with this character, and you would deal 3 damage to each damaged character, and that would be really good. You could play this on 5, then you could play Grab Your Sword on 6, and then quest with this character and deal a lot of damage. Maybe we're being a little bit too hard on it in the C tier. We're going to put it in like the high B tier. Now that I think about it, just because I haven't really seen it in any good decks doesn't mean that deck doesn't exist. Is it going to be an S tier decks? Probably not. Is it going to be an A tier deck or a B plus tier deck? I could see that. I could see that happening. I think the card is underrated. So she's going in the high B tier. Helga Sinclair, Vengeful Partner. 2 cost, 2/1. When this character is challenged and banished, banish the challenging character. That effect is really good. The 1 health is really not good at all, and means that this will be dealt with it very efficiently by Tinkerbell. There's other effects as well, so the opponent will just get around this. If they can't, and Helga banishes a character, it'll probably be something with low attack and health that she would have been able to trade with anyway if she was a 3/2. So I don't think this card is very good. It's going in like the high C tier. Huey, 2 cost, 2/2 with support, and whenever this character quests, if you have characters named Dewey and Louie in play, you may draw 3 cards. That effect is really good, but Dewey and Louie aren't that good, and this is a hard combo to set up. So it's going in C tier. It's fun. It's got potential. Maybe low B tier. With the support, the Huey, Dewey, and Louie deck would be fun, but not very good. I don't think I can put it in B tier. It's got to be C tier. Not really a recommended buy, but it could be fun. That seems to be how C tier is shaping up right now. Not going to be cards that are recommended, but they're like fun, thematic niche cards. Hydra, 6 cost, not inkable, 6/5. Whenever this character is dealt damage, deal that much damage to chosen opposing character. I actually think this is really good. You can choose where the damage goes. I'd like it even better if it said opposing character or location. And not being inkable does hurt it, so it's like I'd handicap it as like a 5/4 due to not being inkable. It has 2 lore, so it will be a threat. And then a 5/4 that deals 5 damage. I mean, I like the card. I think it's really strong. I think it's underrated. I haven't really seen it experimented with much, but I do think it's underrated. I'm going to put it in the high B tier. You could even make a case for A tier, but I haven't really experimented with it enough to say it's definitely A tier, but I'd say high B tier. Next up we have Jafar, Striking Illusionist. This card is S tier. It enables a whole new deck just based around him. I think that deck is a little bit hit or miss, a little bit all or nothing. It just straight up dominates, or when it draws poorly, it loses. But it's an S tier deck, or maybe an A plus tier deck, and it's all built around this Jafar. He's really, really strong. He's definitely S tier. The combo that you play in this deck is a smaller version of Jafar, then you shift this Jafar in, then you play a whole new world to draw 7 and gain 7 lore after you have quested with him to exert. And then he's evasive, so he has a chance of sticking around for another turn, and if you draw another whole new world, then you can whole new world again, and you usually win at that point. So he's really, really, really good. Jim Hawkins, Space Traveler, 5 cost, 4/4. When you play this character, you may play a location with cost 4 or less for free. Whenever you play a location, this character may move there for free. 2 lore. That's very solid cost reduction. You can get a 4 cost location out for free, and then move there to gain that location's effect for free. And then he also quests for 2 lore. He's a really, really strong card. He's an S tier card. I would rank him ahead of Jafar. I think the deck that Jim Hawkins is good in is better than the Jafar deck. Not as versatile as And Then Along Came Zeus. So this S tier and to a certain extent the A tier are going to function as like, this is the order that I would recommend buying these cards if you're buying singles, based on their overall utility and the number of decks you're going to use them in. And I would rank Jim Hawkins ahead of Jafar, Striking Illusionist. John Silver, Greedy Treasure Seeker, 3 cost, 3/3, and for each location you have in play, this character gains 1 resist and gets 1 lore. Very, very strong in the Location Swarm deck. The Location Swarm deck is not very strong. I would put John Silver in the A tier below Chernabog. There may come a time when he fits into a Location Swarm deck if there are enough good locations in the game that deck makes sense. I don't think that's the case right now. I've seen a little bit of experimentation done with it with John Silver. I've never seen a really good John Silver deck, but I think the potential is there. Kida, Protector of Atlantis, shift 3, 5 cost, 3/5. When you play this character, all characters get -3 attack until the start of your next turn. So you can attack with your characters if you want to, and then play this character, and essentially all the opponent's characters will get -3 attack until the start of your next turn. And that will enable all of your characters to survive for 1 turn, where they can then quest again. So the problem is, if you get the setup good enough that this card is really good, you probably don't need it because you're probably going to win anyway, but I do think it's very good. It goes in the Creature Swarm deck typically, so it's going to go high A tier. It's not a super high priority buy though, because that Creature Swarm deck it caps out at like a B plus tier deck. It's not that good, but it is playable at the highest levels, and so Kida's going in the A tier. Little John, 6 cost, 4/5, shift 4. While this character is exerted, your characters with Bodyguard gain resist +1 and get +1 lore. That's good. The problem is Little John is easily dealt with by And Then Along Came Zeus, or he can just be killed, though if you're playing a Bodyguard deck, he'll probably have protection from that. But he could just be killed by Along Came Zeus, or removed with the very popular removal options from bounce decks or from Ruby decks if you're running cards like Yzma or Hades or Maleficent. So I think the Bodyguard Synergy deck, it's interesting. I'm going to put Little John in the B tier. I don't think he's terrible, but building a deck around Bodyguard Synergy probably just isn't really going to fly right now. It'd be like a C tier deck. Lucky the 15th Puppy, 4 cost, non-inkable, 2/3. Exert, reveal the top 3 cards of your deck. You may put each character with 2 cost or less into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. Well, if you got, so you also have, whenever this character quests, if you have 4 or more other characters in play, your other characters get 1 lore this turn. That's a really good effect if you could get it off. It's not easy to have 4 or more other characters in play, and if you do that, you're probably winning the game anyway. Now, if you can draw 3 cards with 2 costs or less, that is very, very good. If you can draw 2 with 2 costs or less, it's okay. So you really need to draw 3 in order for this card to be good. That's hard to do. That's really hard to do. Unless your deck is really designed around it. Maybe you have a ton of low cost cards that you're swarming the board with, and then you have this card, and then you have Piglet. Would that deck be anything? It'd be good if it didn't get AoE'd, but there's a lot of good AoE in the meta right now, so this card is going in the C tier. It's not awful, and it could be a fun deck, which is what these C tier cards are. But I don't think it's good. Lucky Dime, 7 cost, non-inkable. Exert and pay 2 energy. Choose a character of yours and gain lore equal to their willpower. You could use this with something like Belle, or there's a character in the Sapphire Sphere that gets +1 lore for each item. Can be good with that as well. It's a very expensive card though, and it's not inkable. So it could be good in a certain ramp deck, but that's about it. It's not as bad as I first thought when I initially saw the card, but it's not, in my opinion, a high priority card. It is going to go in the low A tier though. I think it goes lower priority than Kita or Chernabog. But it can be decent in a specific deck, a very specific deck. I don't think it's essential for that deck. I think you can play a perfectly fine Sapphire Ruby deck without it. But it can be an asset on occasion. Lyle Tiberius Rourke, 3 cost, not inkable, 2/4. When you play this character, chosen opposing character gains Reckless during their next turn. They can't quest and must challenge a Fable. Whenever one of your other characters is banished, each opponent loses 1 lore. A very, very good card in multiplayer. In solo, so you play him, you force an opponent to take out one of your characters and they lose 1 lore. I mean, you need that to happen more than once for this card to really be anything. Probably 3 times. You need one of your other characters banished without losing this card. And is this better or more efficient than just playing a 3 cost card with 2 lore? No, I don't think so. It's unwieldy. It's interesting, but unwieldy. I'm going to put it in the C tier, pretty low down the C tier. You could make a case for D tier as well. But in multiplayer, it's really good. Madame Medusa, 6 cost, not inkable, 4/4. When you play this character, banish chosen opposing character with 3 attack or less. This is a really, really, really good card. It's going even higher up the priority list than Jim Hawkins. I think it's even more important to Ruby decks than Jim Hawkins. This is going to go in every Ruby deck forever and ever, at least until the next set, and probably after. It's really, really good because it can be used to remove a card like Robin Hood, which costs 5, or Beast, which costs 5, among others, which is crazy good because then you get 4/4 stats and remove a 5 cost card from the board for your 6 cost. So even though it's not inkable, this is a really, really strong card. Very good. And I would only put it second to And Then Along Came Zeus in terms of priority buys of the cards we've looked at so far. Magicka Dispel, 7 cost, not inkable, 4/6. Shift 5 whenever this character quests. Gain lore equal to the cost of one of your items in play. Well, if that was Lucky Dime, and you could quest with this character and then gain 7 lore, that's really, really strong. It doesn't have any lore of its own. It costs 7, it's uninkable, and it has only 4/6 in stats, though it can shift into play for 5, which is pretty good. The combo of Lucky Dime Magicka Dispel is interesting, but Sapphire Amethyst isn't really very good. Any deck that doesn't have Ruby or Steel is going to be not that great unless it really has, unless you're looking at like an Emerald Amethyst combo with the bounce cards or something like that. So I don't see Magicka Dispel getting played out of the Amethyst sphere. If it was a Ruby card, maybe you might see it played if it was Ruby. But I'm out of Amethyst, no. Nonetheless, I'm going to put it in the B tier because I do think it has interesting potential. All these B tier cards are cards that I think have interesting potential and might want to be experimented with. The C tier cards are all fun or thematic cards, and then S and A tier are the serious ones. That's how this list is shaping up. Maleficent, Mistress of All Evil, 5 cost, 2/3. Whenever this character quests, you may draw a card, 2 lore. During your turn, whenever you draw a card, you may move 1 damage counter from chosen character to chosen opposing character. Probably not going to be able to take advantage of that very often, but whenever you quest, you can draw a card. Problem is, you probably need to do that twice in order to make this good, and it will die after the first time unless you're in a position to protect it, and if you're in a position to protect it, you probably don't need it. So I don't think this is very good, but I suppose maybe in a bodyguard deck, I don't know. We'll put it in the B tier. It's interesting. It can be good if you can quest twice with it. It's just that's so unlikely at only 3 health. Mama Odie, 3 cost, non-inkable, 1/3. Whenever you play a song, you may put the top card of your deck into your inkwell, face down and exerted. You would probably need to do that, well, maybe just once actually, in order to make this a good card. I do think this card is good and pretty underrated. Haven't really seen it played. I might try playing it myself though. I think this is good. I really only think you need to play 1 song to make this good. You could play this card, then play your 1 song, and you're off and running. It is expensive at 3 cost with non-inkable. You would not want to be questing with this though, because if you got 2 cards into your inkwell this way, I mean that's really, really strong. I like this card. I haven't seen really anybody play it. I may mess around with it. I think I like it even better than Lucky Dime. It's going in the A tier. That's a strong card for a Sapphire deck, in my opinion. We'll see if I can find a deck where it makes sense. Map of Treasure Island, 3 cost. Exert, you pay 1 less for the next location you play. You pay 1 less to move your characters to a location. This makes sense in the Location Swarm deck. Location Swarm deck, it seems interesting, but it isn't very good right now, so this is going in the C tier. We'll put it fairly high up the C tier, but this is where all the fun thematic decks are going, cards are going right now. And that's what I think the Location Swarm deck is. There may come a time when it's better though, when enough locations enter the card pool that are really, really strong. Then this card, you get a lot better later. Maui, 7 cost, 8/8. This character can't ready. 2 energy, ready this character. That makes the character too expensive, and big removal is too efficient against him. I think this card is terrible, and I would not recommend anybody to pick him up. He's going in there with Gustav the Giant, who also has good stats, but is very unwieldy to play. So, yeah, I think this card is going to be just a game loser when it gets dealt with by like a Maleficent or something. And when it does work perfectly, it's just too expensive for what it offers. Unless some card enters the play that enters the collection that silences your cards, enters the card pool. Maui's Fishhook, 3 cost. If you have a character named Maui in play, you may use this item's shapeshift ability for free. Exert and pay 2 energy, choose 1. Chosen character gains evasive. Chosen character gains 3 attack. When Maui's in, this is really, really good. When he's not, it's still got utility. I think this is going very high A tier. I think it's really good. It's going to be a card that we'll see in pretty much every Ruby deck along with Maui. Probably 2 of, probably not 4 of. But it is really good, in my opinion. I like it a lot. Maui's Place of Exile. 2 cost, 1 movement cost, 5 health. Characters gain 1 resist while here, but no lore pretty much sinks this card immediately. The no lore locations I think are really bad. Gaining 1 resist, you could protect a big character, but not for long with only 5 health. This is going in the F tier. Don't think it's good at all. I think all of the zero lore locations are pretty tough sell, with the possible exception of Pride Lands, except that has 1 lore. So yeah, I don't know if there's any exceptions. The 0 lore locations, that's a tough sell. Mickey Mouse Trumpeter, 0/1, exert and pay 2 energy to play a character for free. Really interesting ramp card. I actually like this card in concept quite a lot. I think it could be really good in a blue steel deck. I'd like to try it. He's going in the A tier. This is on my list of cards to try in decks, along with Mama Odie. Yeah, I like it, and I think there will be a good Mickey Mouse Trumpeter deck before the end of the set. It might not be S tier, but I think it'll be strong. It's a really interesting card. It's easy to deal with, though. It just dies to Tinkerbell. It dies to Grab Your Sword. And you got to keep it around for probably 2 times that you play a character for free to make it good. And so sometimes it'll be really bad and it'll clog up your hand with its uninkableness. But it also has potential to be really strong. Milo Thatch, 7 cost, shift 4, 4/4, 3 lore. When this character is banished, return all opposing characters to their player's hands. I think that is very strong, especially with that shift 4. I haven't really seen this card featured in many decks. I like it. I think it's really good. It's going in the A tier. I'd put it even higher than Chernabog or Kita. I think it will feature in a strong deck. Now, Emerald's got Emerald Steel discard. It's got Emerald Amethyst bounce. This could fit in Emerald Steel discard. The issue is you don't want to play a lot of uninkable cards. And you may already have a card like Genie that's uninkable that you want to play. So it's good. It may not be good enough because of its uninkableness. But I do like the card a lot. And, you know, maybe we put him below Chernabog and Kita. I think that fits better. Above the experimental cards, but I think that card is really good. Minnie Mouse, Musical Artist, 2 cost, 1/3, Singer 3. Whenever you play Bodyguard, remove up to 2 damage. This card is terrible. I would not recommend it for anyone. Only being able to sing up by 1, and then the healing, which we don't really need. Don't like it. Moana, 5 cost, 4/4, shift 3. Whenever this character quests while at a location, ready all other characters here. They can't quest for the rest of this turn, so it's a location synergy card. All of those that I've seen haven't really been up to snuff. We're going to put Moana in the D tier. I don't think she's terrible, but I don't think that ability is going to be consistent enough to make her a good card. Ready all other characters here, meaning, I assume, at the location. But they can't quest, they can only fight. Yeah, I don't think this card is good. D tier for her. Morph, 2 cost, 2/1. You may play any character with shift on this character as if this character had any name. This card is really, really good. I like it a lot. I would even perhaps put it ahead of Jim Hawkins. I think this card is a very high priority buy. I think it's really, really strong. I think it enables you to use some cards that are not commonly used because they shift well. And when I played the Morph deck, Emerald Steel, I really liked it. It felt really good to play. I think it's really, really strong. And so Morph we're going to see a lot of in this set. Very, very good character. Mufasa, Champion of the Pride Lands. 7 cost, 3/10, 3 lore. So a 3 lore threat is good, but the 7 cost and no immediate ability, as we've said about other big cards which don't have an immediate ability, it's a problem because if the opponent just plays Maleficent as part of their Sapphire Ruby or Amethyst Ruby bounce deck, then you just spent 7 energy and got nothing. And this card can also be removed by Madame Medusa or whatever her name is. So that is not a good card, and it's not going to see any play in the current meta unless the aforementioned cards fall out of the meta. So Mufasa is going in the D tier. He's going to be a good card in sealed deck, but that's about it. Other than that, you don't want to spend money picking up this card, even though he has 3 lore, okay stats. To be honest, those stats aren't even that good for his cost. I'd prefer to see, if they want to keep him at 3 attack, I'd prefer to see at least 11 health. 12 would be better. But that 3 attack is just brutal. Makes him too easy to deal with in the current meta. On your feet now, 4 cost, non-inkable. Ready all your characters and deal 1 damage to each of them. They can't quest for the rest of this turn. Unless you have some kind of crazy synergy with dealing self-damage. Don't think this card is good at all. Going to put it in the F tier. Being uninkable, pretty high cost. You'd have to have a crazy board setup to make this good, or some kind of niche fun deck. And yeah, this, if you could get that kind of setup, you'd probably be winning the game already. And you wouldn't need this card, so it's going in the F tier. Perdita, Devoted Mother, 6 cost, non-inkable, 1/6. When you play this character, and whenever she quests, you may play a character with cost 2 or less from your discard for free. This is really good in a character swarm deck. As long as you're playing plenty of characters, you need to have at least 2 characters in your discard with cost 2 or less. And if you do, this is a very strong card. Should go in pretty much every character swarm deck. And the character swarm deck, I mean, I've seen one that I thought was okay. I'll probably showcase it on the channel. It's like a Ruby Amber deck, I think. But it's not an S tier deck. It's like an A tier deck. Still, Perdita is going to go in the A tier up there with Chernabog, in my opinion. Maybe even a little bit better. Might even be a little bit more important to the character swarm deck than Chernabog. I think this card is really good. Very high value. Adds a lot to like a character swarm Mufasa deck. Peter Pan, Lost Boy Leader, 4 cost, 3/3. Once per turn when this character moves to a location, gain lore equal to that location's lore. So probably 2 lore you get once per turn by moving Peter Pan there, which doesn't really make up for his bad stats. I mean, he's okay if you can guarantee moving him to a location, so that puts him in like the niche fun category. He's not good enough to go in the B or A tier because the location swarm deck isn't good enough. It's more of like a fun thematic type deck. Should location swarm ever become playable, this card may rise up the ranks. But as of right now, it's going to fall into the fun category, like Map of Treasure Planet. Peter Pan, Pirate's Bane, 6 cost, 4/5, shift 4, evasive, and whenever he challenges a pirate character, this character takes no damage from the challenge. 2 lore, so he counters a deck that isn't in the meta. He counters like a fun thematic deck, His stats aren't good enough on their own without that ability, so I mean he counters a deck that we just don't see in the competitive meta. So there's no way we could say he is a competitive card himself. He will go in the lower part of the fun thematic category. If your meta includes pirate decks, I suppose you could run this. I can't imagine what meta that might be, but suppose it could happen. Piglet, 2 cost, 2/2. When you have 2 or more other characters in play, this character gets +2 lore. He's a great card in a character swarm deck. He's really, really good. I'd put him toward the top end of the A tier, in the same category with the others. Probably even better than Perdita. I like that card in a character swarm deck, and that character swarm deck tops out at like a tier, maybe high A tier if you get it optimized perfectly. Not S tier, but it's pretty good. And so Piglet's pretty good. Perdita, Chernabog, they're all pretty good as part of that deck. Pluto, Determined Defender, 7 cost, 3/8, shift 5, bodyguard, 2 lore. At the start of your turn, remove up to 3 damage from this character. So he can be difficult to deal with. 3/8 in stats isn't good, even for a bodyguard. If you can shift him in, he's decent. He does see play in some character swarm decks as like a Tiana type deck where you want to protect Tiana, you want to protect your lore generators. He sees play in that type of deck. He's going to go in like the high B tier. He is good in a deck that's kind of outdated now. Tiana deck is kind of outdated because she just dies to Along Came Zeus. Well, she dies to Along Came Zeus if you can't activate her ability, I should say. I tried the Tiana deck, and it didn't work that well, but it was a 50% winner. Maybe a little bit above the 50% winner, and I ran Pluto Determined Defender in that deck, and he was a pretty decent big threat. But that deck is nowhere near good enough to put him in the A or S tier, I don't think, and I haven't really seen him in other decks. I don't really see him in the Mufasa deck that much, though you could make a case for it. I might be being a little hard on Pluto Determined Defender. He might belong in like the low A tier. Let's see how it shapes up at the end when we've got all the cards ranked. Pongo, Determined Father. 3 cost, 3/2. Once per turn, you may pay 2 energy to reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a character, put it into your hand. Otherwise, put it on the bottom of the deck. Paying 2 to draw a card is not that good. If you're playing Character Swarm, your deck is probably all characters, and you might not mind. I mean, you would almost always draw a card for your 2 energy. However, 2 energy to draw a card is expensive. Now, in the Character Swarm deck, it can struggle to draw cards with the exception of something like Rapunzel. So you might be okay with the steep cost to draw cards just because you're starving for card draw so much. So he's not going to go too low down. He's going to go like low B tier because I think he's got a place in Character Swarm decks, but it's not a high place. It's not a great place. So I'd consider him even a little bit less than Pluto, but he is playable. He is playable. He fulfills a role that's needed in that deck, even though he does so inefficiently. Pride Lands, 2 cost, 2 movement cost, 7 health. Characters get +2 defense while here. If you have a prince or king character here, you pay 1 energy less to play characters, 1 lore. It's a big investment of resources to get set up. You've got to have the location, you've got to have a prince or a king, you've got to pay for that character, and then you've got to pay 2 to get them to the Pride Lands, and it's only going to last as long as it takes the opponent to do 7 health or find a Rise of the Titans. It is unlikely you will get enough payoff out of this card to make the setup worthwhile, so it's going into the fun or thematic category, which is the C tier, because I don't think it's going to be very competitive, but it might be fun to play if you can get it paid off, maybe against other fun decks if you're just playing for fun, not competitively. Prince Eric, 4 cost 2/2. When this character is banished, you may banish chosen character to lore. This character does see play sometimes in Amethyst Sapphire, or Amethyst Ruby. And even Ruby deck, really, sometimes I see Eric. I think he's okay. The 4 cost not inkable is, his stats are pretty weak for that cost. The 2 lore is nice, so it encourages the opponent to banish him because he quests for 2 lore every turn. You can banish a chosen character. You might get a high value banish out of that. It is likely, though, that if there is a high value banish available to you, that the opponent will simply not banish this character if they can help it. Now you may be able to attack him into something and banish him that way. All things considered, I think the card is okay. It's an A tier card, I think. Gonna put it, I would say, behind Lucky Dime, which is likely gonna move up this tier list. I think it's decent. It's a good card. It's a good solid card. It's not necessary to play a really strong deck. It can maybe improve it a little bit over some other options. If that sounds a bit tepid for an A tier card, it is. I think the card has its moments. It is also cumbersome due to being uninkable. So it's a nice card to have in your collection. It's not a necessary card to have. Pyros, Lava Titan, 5 cost 5/4. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may ready chosen character. I don't put very much value on that ability. Yeah, you could use it to double quest, but the setup to make that really good is not going to happen very often. And this character will die fairly easily to Along Came Zeus or other removals. So I think it's a very hard card to set up and execute. If you could with like a, I don't know, 4 lore Goofy or something. Doesn't say you can't quest twice, so you could quest twice, but requires too much setup to be reliable. So it's going in the C tier for the fun cards. Rafiki, 1 cost, 0/2, challenger +3. Whenever he challenges a hyena, this character takes no damage from the challenge. That ability almost never comes into play, but he is a very good 1-drop, and he's a very good 1-drop in a color that doesn't have a lot of good 1-drops. So Rafiki's going to see play in almost every Amethyst deck. He's going in the S tier. He's really, really strong. He is going to see a lot of play. And, I mean, you get 3/2 in stats if you play him well. Quests for 1. 0/2 hurts him when he gets attacked. He trades up really well with some pretty decent cards. I like this card a lot, and I think every Amethyst player is going to want him in the collection. 4 of. He's really strong. Next up we have RLS Legacy. 4 cost, not inkable, 3 movement cost, 8 health. Characters gain evasive while here. If you have a character here, you pay 2 energy less to move a character of yours here. 2 lore. The main reason you play it is for that 2 lore and 8 health. The ability isn't going to come into play very often. You could play it with Jim Hawkins and it'll be pretty good. It's going to go in the A tier for that reason alone. Its utility with Jim Hawkins. We're going to end up resorting these tiers, the top 2 tiers at least at the end, but it's going in the A tier with Jim Hawkins. Now if it wasn't with Jim Hawkins, it's a B tier card. And it's not the best location with Jim Hawkins. I actually think this is going to go in the B tier ahead of Hydra, now that I think about it. Maybe high B tier. I think it's a very expensive location. It doesn't provide much, but if you could play it for free with Jim Hawkins and then move him there, and then you can pay 2 energy less to move other characters there, it's okay. But that situation is too niche to make this any higher than a B tier card. Which brings us to Robin Hood, Champion of Sherwood. 5 cost 3/6, shift 3 during your turn. Whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, gain 2 lore. When this character is banished in a challenge, you may draw a card. This is one of the best cards in the game. It is very, very good. Overpowered in my opinion. I mean, just being a 5 cost 3/6 that draws a card when it's banished would be good. That would be playable alone. The shift 3, the gaining lore when you banish another character, that's just icing on the cake. This is one of the best cards in the game. It's going to go in pretty much every steel deck, so we're putting it in the S tier. And we'll arrange the S and A tier later. But yeah, this card is really, really good. Really good. Everybody's going to want 4 of. Every serious player. Robin Hood Daydreamer, 6 cost, 4/5, 4 lore. The stats aren't good. The 4 lore is why you would play this card. However, so you could, I suppose, see play. This could see play in like a Emerald Sapphire deck with Lucky Dime, but other than that, it's hard to justify a high cost card that doesn't do anything right away because they're too vulnerable to removal. They give too much value to removal. Now, this can't be removed by Madame Medusa, but it can be removed by Maleficent, Hades, any kind of bounce cards that return cards to your opponent's hand, Genie. So the 4 lore is nice, and if you have the card but you don't have other really good high cost cards, you could play this card. But I think it's very cookie cutter. And just by virtue of having 4 lore, though, it's going to go in the B tier because I do think 4 lore cards are never going to be bad. This one does die immediately to a Long Came Zeus, and it dies. It's an efficient trade for your opponent. But 4 lore, it's very rarely going to be a bad card. It's when it sticks to the board, generating 4 lore is going to be really good. So I can't put it in the C tier, and I think it'll have utility in combination with other cards like Lucky Dime. In certain decks. Scrooge McDuck, richest duck in the world. 5 cost, uninkable, 3/5. During your turn, this character gains evasive. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may play an item for free. He's too expensive, and that setup is too hard to make this good. You'd have to banish probably 2 characters in challenges. And for a 3/5, that just isn't going to happen that much. So he costs too much, and his effect and stats are not strong enough to make up for that cost. So he's going in the C tier. Just for fun, I would play this character, because otherwise he's just too expensive in any other deck than a fun deck. Shenzi, Hyena Pack Leader, 4 cost 0/6. While this character is at a location, she gets +3 attack. While this character is at a location, whenever she challenges another character, you may draw a card. So a 4 cost 3/6 at best, but you can draw a card whenever she challenges, and that is really good. So if you could get her to a location and then challenge a character and draw a card, that's really strong for 4 cost. That's not easy to do, though. So, and a lot of the time I think she's going to be a 0/6. These characters that get buffs from locations, I think they're generally C tier cards. I think that deck is just a fun deck, owing to the difficulty in setting up its combos and the weakness when you fail to do so. So Shenzi is going in the C tier, though I'm open to the possibility of the location deck being good at a later point. Sheriff of Nottingham, Corrupt Official, 4 cost, uninkable, 2/4. Whenever you discard a card, you may deal 1 damage to chosen opposing character. Whenever you discard a card, You would have to discard how many cards to make this good? Probably like 6. That just isn't going to happen. I don't think this character is good. He's too expensive. Uninkable is a pretty big downside. I'm going to put him in the D tier. Not entirely unplayable, but I think he's hard to use unless there's combos out there that'll allow you to discard 5 or 6 cards reliably. But man, you would have to draw a lot of cards. So I think this character is garbage. It's very expensive. Doesn't offer enough. Next up we have Simba, 7 cost, 5/7. When you play this character and whenever he banishes another character in a challenge during your turn, you may choose one. Draw 2 cards, then choose and discard 2. Deal 2 damage to chosen character. So you can cycle with him or you can get some board control. The issue is he's a decent card, but he's competing in that cost slot in this color with Cinderella. Cinderella is also a character that fights hard for the board, but Cinderella has 3 lore and Simba only offers 2. And Cinderella can shift into play, and Simba can't do that. So what this character really needs to be top tier is he needs to be able to shift onto a smaller version of Simba, and potentially he needs 3 lore as well. And you could drop his HP by 1 to like 5, 6 if you gave him 3 lore, and then he would be a very strong card, similar to Cinderella. But as he is, he's going to lose in the competition to Cinderella for this role, and he's not going to see a lot of play. Now, he does offer you something right away when you play him, which is really good, because there's a lot of cards in the meta a lot of removal in the meta right now. So that's good, and Simba's decent. He is a card I'd like to experiment with some. Cycling is good, especially in some decks like Amethyst, Steel, Jafar, for example. Cycling would be good. I might experiment with him in that deck. He's going to go in the B tier, kind of lower down the B tier. I think he's good. He's just outclassed by Cinderella in most situations. Simba, Scrappy Cub, 2 cost, non-inkable, 1/1 with 3 lore. That's about all there is to say about him. These low cost 3 lore cards are good, that offer more lore than the cost that you spend for them. He's usually going to be able to get that 3 lore off at least once in the early game. If he's protected by a bodyguard, he may be able to more than once, which is a very good aggro strategy. But he just dies to steal cards like Tinkerbell or Grab Your Sword without really doing anything. So in the late game, he's going to struggle against Steel. He's probably going to struggle. He's going to go in the B tier as well. He'll be decent in aggro. Some aggro decks, not all, but that's about it. Starlight Vial, 4 cost, non-inkable. Exert, you pay 2 energy less for the next action you play this turn. 2 energy, banish this item, draw 2 cards, then choose and discard a card. That trap ability is really not good. I suppose it's like an emergency, I absolutely have to find something ability, but it's not efficient for its cost. It should be 6 cost overall to draw 2 cards, then choose and discard a card. That would be terrible. Exerting and paying 2 less for the next action you play this turn would be good if you play a lot of actions, but there aren't really any meta decks that run a lot of actions, except for Songs decks, and those don't need the cost reduction too much. So I don't think this card is good right now. I'm putting it in the D tier. I think it's pretty bad. It's very, very expensive for what it offers with that trap ability, and with the efficient energy ability, the deck where that's good just doesn't exist at the moment. Stitch Covert Agent, 5 cost, 3/3, evasive. While this character is at a location, he gains ward to lore. Those are pretty low stats for the cost. So he's intended to be very survivable when he's at a location with evasive and ward. So the high cost is due to the fact that they expect if you get him to a location, he's going to survive a long time. Problem is the opponent can just deal with the location relatively easily, and then can use removal on Stitch, and he's only got 2 lore. I think he needs at least 3 to be good. I think this character is really bad. He's also going in the D tier. I think he's too expensive, and locations don't offer enough cover. So I think he needs at least 3 lore to be good. And maybe even 4. Maybe 4. At 4, he probably sees play a lot. At 3, I still don't think he sees play too much at 3 lore. This cost is too much, and the requirement to get him to a location adds additional cost. Stratos Tornado Titan, 5 cost 4/4 with evasive. Exert to gain lore equal to the number of Titan characters you have in play. If you had like 4 Titan characters in play, that would be good, but you have to set that up, and then he just dies to removal, like Along Came Zeus, or Sapphire, or Ruby removal, or even Sapphire removal. This card is bad right now. It's not even a fun playable card, I don't think. It's going to go in D tier, low down the D tier. Potentially he could be F tier though. He's not good because of the amount of setup you need, because of the lack of good Titans available. I mean, I suppose we could put him in the fun tier. It really doesn't feel like that deck would be that much fun though, so I think D tier is appropriate. Bare Necessities, 2 cost song. Chosen opponent reveals their hand and discards a non-character card of your choice, so you can disrupt combos. This is a very important card to the Amber Steel Songs deck, which is a very good deck. I don't think it's absolutely essential to that deck, but it's pretty close. It's going to go in the high A tier. It may get moved up to S tier later in the video. We'll see. But it's a very good card, and it's very important in the current meta for Amber Steel Songs in order to be able to disrupt combos. So I think this card is a very important card that players are going to want to get if you want to play Amber Steel, the best version of that deck. Boss is on a roll, 3 cost. Look at the top 5 cards of your deck. Put any number of them on the top or bottom of your deck in any order. Gain 1 lore. I've seen this played a lot in Jafar decks. I'm not a big fan of it. You don't draw any cards, so you don't gain any value for your 3 cost or for your song. You can set up combos easier, but merely setting up combos easier, is this worth more than just drawing a card? Would you rather play this, or would you rather play the 3-drop Maleficent in order to draw a card? I think you'd rather play the card draw. Would you rather play this, or would you rather play Cusco to draw a card? I think you'd rather play Cusco. Would you play all 3? Probably not. So I've seen this played a lot. I just don't think it's very good. It's not totally useless. It's going to go in the B tier, but I don't think that this card is very good. And when I see it in deck lists and I want to play the deck, I swap it out for a card that draws a card, because I just don't think it's that good. The Lamp, 2 cost non-inkable. Banish this item if you have a character named Jafar in play. Draw 2 cards. If you have Genie in play, return chosen character with cost 4 or less to their player's hand. Never really seen this played with Genie before, but I see it played with Jafar a lot, and it's really good with Jafar. It's going in the S tier, with the caveat that if you don't intend to play Jafar, you don't need to pick up this card, but if you do, you'll want this card as well. Drawing 2 cards for 2 cost is very good. Not being inkable does hurt, but low cost cards that aren't inkable and then that draw more cards, I think that mitigates the uninkable. So I'm not really holding it against this card, and I'm thinking of it as just drawing 2 for 2 cost, and that's very strong. But needing to play Jafar is a downside, but since it's an item, it can just sit on the table until you're ready for it and then draw your cards. I think it's really good. Maybe A tier. Maybe A tier. I don't think it's quite good enough to deserve S tier. S tier is like a must buy for this set. And I don't know if it's that good, but it is very good in the Jafar deck. Outside the Jafar deck, not really. Queen's Castle, 4 cost, 1 movement cost, 7 health. At the start of your turn, for each character you have here, you may draw a card. 2 lore. This card is exceptional. One of the strongest cards in the game, I would say. It's going in the S tier for sure. It offers card draw, it offers lore generation, it's inkable, it has a low movement cost. This is a phenomenal card, represents a big threat. Every time it comes down on the board, it changes the meta in that it makes a lot of steel players run Rise of the Titans just to deal with this card, which is the most played location currently. It's really, really good, and every serious player is going to want it for their Amethyst decks. At least one of the Amethyst decks that you want to run will run this card or will be improved by running this card. It's really, really strong. It's a contender for best card in the set. Sorcerer's Hat, 2 cost, exert, and pay 1 energy. Name a card, then reveal the top card of your deck. If it's the named card, put that card into your hand, otherwise put it on the top of your deck. So you pay 2 and then you pay 1 to draw a card, but only if you know what the card is on the top of your deck, basically. So you have to use other cards to set this up. It's because of that it's not very good, and it's going in the D tier. In fact, it's pretty bad. I don't think you're really ever going to see it played except in like a fun scrying deck, but like the Titans deck, I don't actually think that deck is going to be that much fun to play, so this card is going in the D tier. It's not totally useless, so it's not an F tier card, but it's pretty bad. Tinkerbell, very clever fairy, 5 cost, 3/4. Whenever one of your cards is banished, you may put that card into your inkwell, face down, and exert it. Well, obviously opponents aren't going to want to banish your cards while this is out. How many cards would you need to put into your inkwell for this card to be good? Probably 2. If you can put 2 cards into your inkwell, well, maybe 1. Would 1 be sufficient? Depends on what point you're at in the game. If you're pretty late in the game, no, not really. But if you're right on turn 5, you don't get anything right away, but you don't get a lot right away. You get some stats, but you do get the high potential for value with the card. I think it's okay. I think there are better options for ramping up, so I don't think it's going to see play in a lot of decks. Put it in the C tier. It's not that this effect is bad, it's just that there are better options for ramping, and you don't need to include all the ramp cards in Sapphire. That'd be too greedy. You usually only include a couple. And those slots are being filled right now by like Fishborn Quill or Mickey Mouse type cards, and so Tinkerbell's not really going to see play just because it's outclassed by other cards. Potentially, if you didn't have those cards, you could maybe play this as a fill-in to go easier on your wallet. But other than that, I don't think Tinkerbell will see play. Treasure Guardian, 4 cost, not inkable. This character can't challenge or quest unless it's at a location. That caveat, that requirement, means this character isn't very good. It'll go in the C tier with the other location cards, but to deal with this, your opponent just needs to deal with the location, and then you're stuck paying more energy in order to make this card playable again. So yes, it's 4 for 6/6, but that's deceptive because it's not inkable and you have to pay the location requirements. You may have to pay the location requirements multiple times to get full value out of this. So it's pretty bad. I actually think it's going to go lower than, I think it's going to go in the F tier. I think most of the time you're going to end up paying at least 6 for your 6/6 in stats, and it's not inkable, so I think this card is deceptively bad. I think it's really bad. Ursula, Deceiver of All, 3 cost 2/3. Whenever this character sings a song, you may play that song again from your discard for free, then put it on the bottom of your deck. This is an S tier card, one of the best in the entire set, one of the best in the game. Really, really good card. The value you get singing those songs twice is very, very high. So this is a card I would put in pretty much every Emerald deck. Improves Emerald decks quite a bit. Very, very strong. Definitely a must-have for Emerald players. Really good card. Ursula Sea Witch, 3 cost 3/3, not inkable. Whenever this character quests, chosen opposing character can't ready at the start of their next turn. Well, typically if an opposing character is already exerted, you want to just kill it with one of your characters. You don't really need to control it that way. So if you do that with this character, if you stop an opposing character from readying that's exerted without killing them, and then this character dies, then that character will just be able to ready again, and you will have not dealt with them. So I think this card is really bad. I think it's going in the D tier, probably the F tier. I think it's unplayable. Basically, it's unplayable garbage. It really doesn't need to be uninkable. It really doesn't need to be only one lore, but it is, and so yeah, I'm not recommending that anyone pick this one up. And the final card we'll look at in this tier list is Wendy Darling, Authority on Peter Pan. 3 cost 3/1 with Ward and Support. Whenever this character quests, you may add their attack to another chosen character's attack this turn, and to Lore. That's a good card, except that it dies to Steel's AoE. Yes, it can't be chosen specifically for removal, but it will die to Grab Your Sword, and it will die to Tinkerbell. And so, if it didn't die to either of those things, would it be good? So it's not got evasive, which I think is what it's missing. So if you use the questing, you use the support. I don't know why this has Ward, to be honest, instead of evasive. I'd rather it have evasive. Or if it had Ward and evasive, it would be phenomenal. But I think it really needs to be evasive and not Ward to be any good. Because it can just be killed by any random one drop, really. As soon as it quests, so you really only get one use out of it. You get 2 lore, and you get to add 3 attack to another character's attack this turn, which you won't always need. In fact, you often won't, and it will just go to waste. So I think Wendy Darling is not good, but it does have 2 lore, which means it's playable. 3 cost for 2 lore isn't bad. So it is playable, but it's not very good. So that's all of the rares, super rares, and legendaries in the set. Let's take a look at the final ordering where we want everything. I think Jim Hawkins goes fairly low down the S tier. Then along came Zeus. Robin Hood I'm comfortable with at the top. Ursula, Madame Medusa. I think Queen's Gambit goes even higher than Madame Medusa. Then we have Morph, we have Jafar, we have Jim Hawkins, we have Rafiki. I'm pretty happy with that order overall. I know Jafar is really, really important to his deck, but I don't think the Jafar deck is that good. I think it's lower tier compared to other decks in the set. Maybe like an A tier as opposed to an S tier. It's above the aggro deck that I've seen, or maybe equivalent to some of them. The top tier aggro decks are probably roughly equivalent to Jafar. So I like that order for the S tier. I think I'm going to move Cursed Merfolk up to the lower end of the S tier, and well, I think I can leave it high A tier. It's not an absolute must-have. Bare Necessities, I think, is a little bit better than Cursed Merfolk, just because Amber Songs is so good in the current meta. Maui's Fishhook is going to get moved up. The Lamp I'm happy with there. Lucky Dime I think is better than I gave it credit for. I'm going to move that all the way up to like high A tier, because Ruby Sapphire is in a good spot right now, and Lucky Dime is an important card to counter Amethyst Ruby, which is everywhere because it's fairly easy to build. And so Lucky Dime is a very important card for that deck, so it's going high A tier. I think I was too hard on it earlier. Everything else I think we're okay with. in its current position. So these are the cards, the S and the A tier cards are the cards that I would recommend buying. RLS Legacy I think can go low B tier. The other cards that you're seeing, the B, C, D, and F, B, sometimes you'll want to buy them. There may be cards to experiment with in there, but not must-haves. The S and the A tier cards are the ones I think you're really going to want. Mama Odie, I think we can drop her down to B tier. John Silver can drop down to B tier. Grandma Tala, maybe the lower part of the A tier. Same with Milo Thatch and Mickey Mouse Trumpeter. So that's more comfortable with the low part of the A tier, maybe being cards you don't pick up or you pick up later in the set. And so these S and A tier cards in these first two rows are the ones that I think players will really want to get from this set. Roughly in that order. And then anything lower down than that is going to be cards you might want to experiment with a little bit. We can probably drop these three down to the B tier for that reason, just for consistency. So S and A tier, buy these cards. B tier, maybe, if they seem interesting, if you want to experiment a little bit, depending on which decks you play. Fang, I think, can drop to C tier. And then C tier cards will be just for fun, but they should be relatively fun and playable. And then D and F tier are just garbage, in my opinion. With D tier maybe being playable sometimes. So that's our tier list for the Into the Inklands rares, super rares, and legendary cards. And thank you for watching.